Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us on what turned out to be an absolutely beautiful night. So we appreciate your time tonight, and we'll try our best to get you out of here by 8 o'clock, as we promise. My name is Eric Halverson. I'm the principal with RKG Associates. I'm joined by my colleagues, Summer Pan from RKG, Francisco Gomes from FHI, and Paula from Innes Associates, and together we're the team that's been working with all of you and the staff in the town to create what we'll see tonight, which are the recommendations and potential options for rethinking downtown Westborough. We have a presentation. I hope you'll bear with us. We've done a lot of work since we last met. We have a lot to share with you and a lot of kind of setup that will help you engage in the table activity after we get done with the presentation. If you have questions, please flag us, as we'll be roaming around after the presentation, helping folks with the table discussion. So if you have questions for any of us, just flag us. We're more than happy to answer them. If you have any comments or questions, there's little, Brian, they're on the table, little white comment cards. You can add comments, you can add questions. We'll collect those and we'll make sure we get those answered as well. Thanks, Daniel. We'll do the table exercises for about 45 minutes, and then we'd love for each table just to give, I know this is always difficult, but like a 1 to 2 minute report out about what you discussed at your table and what options you came up with, and then we'll talk about next steps before we go. Okay, so we had a really well-attended meeting a couple months ago. I know I see some familiar faces tonight from that meeting where we engaged you in a whole series of questions about what you like about the downtown today, what would you potentially change about the downtown today? As you think about the future, what does success look like for downtown Westborough if we're thinking 5, 10, 20 years into the future? And we took all that information as a way to create what you'll see tonight in terms of the table exercises, the different options, and also the recommendations and strategies. But I just wanted to recap for some folks who weren't here or may not have had a chance to go to every station. This is just only a handful of things that we pulled out, but kind of the most highly mentioned answers to each of the questions that we had. So we asked everybody at one of the stations, what do you love about downtown today? And I always like this one. It had the hometown feel of Westborough. Folks love the historic nature of parts of the downtown. There's some really good restaurants, places to gather. There are some outdoor spaces to socialize, meet your family, meet your friends, meet your neighbors. There's a comment in here that I noticed when I came and did the first site visit, which was when you're here in the later part of the afternoon and school's letting out, there's a ton of activity, foot traffic from the kids who are coming from school, walking either to or through downtown. You don't see that everywhere that we work, so I think that's kind of a unique aspect. And some folks even mentioned that they liked the Rotary, but I thought as we dug into it, it was kind of interesting. The reason isn't because it functions really well, although maybe some people think that. It was actually that there's a space in the middle that is important to the town where campaigns happen and Christmas lighting, like Christmas tree lighting happens and things like that. So as we go through our scenarios, you'll see we tried to incorporate and respect that aspect of the Rotary, even though we have options that tweak and change that a bit. What would you change about downtown? Redirecting truck traffic if possible. Big focus on improving walkability, pedestrian safety, bicycle access and parking. Just improving the signage to help people figure out where to go, when they can go there, where to park, how long they can park in a space for, where are the different businesses. Changes to zoning, which you'll hear about, to potentially allow for a different mix of uses or maybe some redevelopment of smaller scale buildings into larger scale buildings. And a lot about kind of trying to activate downtown for more hours of the day. So maybe spilling into and over 5 o'clock, so maybe from 5 to 9 or 5 to 10, having cultural uses, entertainment uses, restaurants that are open longer, shops that are open longer. We had a whole station dedicated to transportation and a lot of feedback on that. Probably no surprise, a lot of comments about the Rotary being confusing to drivers and being very challenging to navigate, whether it's on the periphery or if you're trying to go through it as a pedestrian, trying to make that better. Can we detail and enforce the parking rules, improve the signage for parking so people actually know where to park and more importantly, where they can't park? And then how do we make bike improvements for all types of cyclists from advanced to beginner? How do we connect cycling routes, whether they're on street or off street? How do we connect that to the larger system that the town's working on? And lastly, we asked a question around what does success look like if we're thinking about the future? More spaces for outdoor gathering and socializing. I think a different and maybe improved mix of uses in the downtown. Active first floors for things like restaurants, retail, cultural, entertainment, dining. And then also a focus on understanding what makes downtown special, a lot of the historic aspects, and trying to preserve and respect that character here that's here today. We also, the last table that we had was a big map similar to the one that you see on your tables, and we asked folks to take different colored stickers and put them where they might want to see different types of uses in the future. So there were a couple of key areas, and these will be reflected in the exercise. So there's kind of this area along Main Street. These bubbles will pop up along the way, where folks talked about maybe sit-down restaurants, maybe bringing some housing in as we come up along East Main Street underneath the bridge, and trying to integrate maybe some residential uses there. We talked about the area down like Union Street area, and maybe this could be an opportunity for additional retail, maybe some additional housing over time, recognizing that these buildings are there today. In the block along South Street, maybe rethinking some of these areas. There's a lot of surface parking there that's kind of tucked behind a lot of the buildings. So could those buildings be brought closer to the street, maybe go up a little bit and have some mixed use, some more active first floor with retail, restaurants, maybe some residential above. Then we have the area going up Summer and Milk, so up toward the Dairy Queen, the gas station, kind of rethinking this area maybe as a place for additional public space, also for some residential and some more commercial uses. This area down here on the south side of the study area was really interesting. Kind of a lot of holes right now with impervious surfaces, off-street parking. So could this be an area where we almost mirror in a way the residential neighborhood that's across the street with maybe some smaller scale housing options, maybe something like a townhouse over there that isn't a big, 3-4 story building, but kind of mirrors a little bit more the scale that's across the street in that neighborhood. And then lastly, the area over by Town Hall. So a lot of folks wanted to maybe improve some of those alleyways and maybe try to create some more public space over there to connect to the parking that's behind there, and also to try and activate the area around the church and the Town Hall. So a lot of really, really good ideas, really interesting ideas. Same with public space on the far side of Bay State Commons, maybe a way to try to bring Bay State Green down into Bay State Commons because of the future community center at the tail end of Bay State. So trying to maybe create some kind of a linear greenway or green area there that can connect Bay State down to the community center. So we took all of that information, digested it, and then tried our best to come up with a couple of different scenarios for downtown to present to you tonight. After talking with the team, talking with town staff, and listening to all of you, I think there was a recognition that the key to unlocking more of the vibrancy of downtown and having people be able to park and walk around and get around safely, we probably need to figure out how to address the Rotary. It's in the center of downtown, and no matter how you look at it or how you treat it, it sometimes can be a barrier depending on how you're trying to move around. So our thinking kind of started with, what are the options that we could think about for the Rotary? Francisco and Nick, who's not here, the engineers on the team, came up with, I think, 11 or 12 different options for what to do there. Some of them were very much out of the box, and we kind of nixed them pretty quickly. Some of them were, I think, very reasonable, and we'll share those with you tonight. And we're all really looking forward to getting your feedback on these, because some of them are a little bit out of the box. So from a spectrum of change, what we hope to show you tonight is something from minimal to kind of a bold new vision. Minimal change is going to show you kind of a modified Rotary or modified roundabout. It's going to try to clean up the roundabout. It's going to try to channelize the traffic. It's going to try to narrow pedestrian crossings, make the sidewalks a little bit bigger and more manageable, but largely keep the rotary and the functionality in place. So that would kind of be like our minimal cost scenario. And along with that, we have a development scenario that would also be minimal. So looking for strategic locations where redevelopment could happen, but not trying to wholesale change the downtown. On the far end, we have a bold new vision, what we're sort of internally calling the domino, and you'll see why. And it completely creates a new town center where the rotary would be gone, but we would create a much larger town green and actually some additional potential development parcels around town green. And you'll see what that looks like. Then we kind of have one that's in the middle called modified town center, where we're going to take the rotary, largely keep the green space in place, but make it a little bit bigger. So it would sort of exist where it is today, but it would be bigger. Traffic would sort of flow around it. And there's even an opportunity to kind of make a pedestrian-only street where Milk Street is today that would connect from up where Milk is up by the Dairy Queen and the gas station sort of running south down past this sort of new town green. And that could be either be used as a traditional road for traffic, or it could be closed off and used as a pedestrian-only space that could be used for all sorts of things, outdoor farmers markets, concerts, you name it. So we're going to show you those three, and we hope you'll keep an open mind as we think about them. There are obviously pros and cons to all three of these, and we'll talk about those, but there's certainly some good aspects to all of them, and they all have merit. And we're going to ask you in the table exercises to talk amongst yourselves and sort of give us your opinions on those.
Okay, thank you, Eric. As Eric mentioned, my team has been working on the mobility-related components of this plan. And so let's start with what you have, the big intersection. This is an incredible photo. We looked up juggernaut in the dictionary. This picture was next to it, so we used it. We're looking straight down at a very complex intersection, and which makes this, as you all know, a very challenging pedestrian environment. We did the traffic modeling on this, so it's very obvious to us that this is a challenging pedestrian environment. We know from taking a look at the crash data that there are lots of crashes associated with this intersection. The question for our team is, yes, but is it functioning? Is it operational with respect to traffic? Is it adequately processing traffic? Do we want to entertain disturbing something that is adequately moving traffic? And the answer to that is no, it is not. It is a level of service F. The grading system on level of service is much like in school. It's A through F, and F is for failing. So it does not adequately process traffic, which means very long queues, right? You have to wait a long time at peak hour to get through the intersection. So from just about every perspective we look at it, it's not doing a very good job. As Eric mentioned, the one asset is you have the center of it is a kind of a ceremonial place, and it's green. And so that's ostensibly your town green. You have Bay State Commons, but it's your town green, historically. So all of our concepts, we seek to preserve that or integrate that into a more robust concept. So let's walk through those. And as I mentioned, we did traffic modeling. And so this, if the video works, this is what it looks like. And we've got a few seconds of that. If you can see the cars, they queue up southbound. They start to queue up during peak hour. Northbound is not too bad of a queue, but you've got from coming off of Milk Street, you have a deep queue, and I walked it right before our meeting, and it looked basically just like that, actually a couple cars deeper. So there's a lot of queuing. Things move, it works, it processes, but very unpredictably. And as a pedestrian, unpredictability is not good, right? It makes for a very stressful environment, and so that's one of the major deficiencies. So as Eric mentioned, we looked at a number of concepts, and we're now calling the domino concept the grid concept, because dominoes makes it sound like things are just going to start falling. We have three basic concepts. One is a modern roundabout. Let's stick with the circular geometry, but let's change all the approaches and alignment to slow all the vehicles down, to shorten pedestrian crossing distances, and to be more in line with modern roundabout design. So we anticipate it would be safer and more pedestrian friendly, but there's still a lot going on. So we modeled that, and I'll show you a video how that works. The next is what we call a triangle concept, and that's somewhere in the middle. It's really realigning Milk Street and South Street to the north and creating a new intersection there. It depends on traffic signal to operate. And it preserves the green at the center. It changes the shape into a triangle. And then finally is the grid concept, formerly known as the domino concept. And it was called domino because it's shaped a little like a domino. That would create a new town square or grid of streets downtown, a little mini grid. And your town green, the circle, gets captured by a square. And so all of that space would be captured, just be in a square. And we create a new street on the east or on the right side of that graphic would be a brand new street. It requires the taking of a couple of properties, non-historic buildings, some lower value structures, but it's possible while preserving the rest of the fabric that you have. So that creates all sorts of new opportunities for some infill development, for a new streetscape. It would be a more pedestrian-friendly street. It would have stop signs, not traffic lights, just one lane in each direction, and provide opportunities for on-street parking. It could be closed off for pedestrians. There's lots of opportunities, and that's all of what we want to get to at the tabletop exercises following this presentation. So when we take a look at the concepts and how they perform, what we see is the modern roundabout still functions at a level of service F, and we squeezed as much as we could out of this. It's already a non-ideal design in that it's a multi-lane roundabout on one leg of it, which those are very complicated for users and more complicated for pedestrians because they have to cross multiple lanes. So it's less than ideal from that perspective, and it just doesn't perform well. No matter what we did to engineer things, adjust things, add lanes here, change approaches, we really couldn't get it to perform any better than what your rotary currently performs at. And so as we take a look at the simulation for this, we see a big backup on Milk Street to the west there, a big queue. We have traffic, it processes traffic, but the traffic starts to build. So coming off of South Street, the queue it's off the screen, it's building. So we have a couple legs that perform really poorly, and there's not much we could do to improve that function. The one benefit is the approach speeds are all much slower because the approaches on East and West Main Street come in at an angle now, and they're not a straight pass through the intersection. And then there are more islands for pedestrians as well, pedestrian refuge islands to shorten and break up those crossing distances. So, and Eric will talk about some of the benefits of this concept with respect to development, infill development potential.
So just building quickly off of what we talked about earlier, there are some opportunities to think about, do some of those auto-oriented uses that folks talked about in the first meeting, did those change over time? Are there opportunities to look at where there might be a smaller one-story building with a large parking lot? And can we rethink that to help bring the buildings closer to the street, reframe it, and make the new parts of the downtown or the new development areas of the downtown look and feel a little bit more like they do on West Main Street, where the more historic buildings are, where you have multi-story buildings, you have them brought closer to the sidewalk, they help frame the street and kind of create the more traditional downtown, versus in some areas, the buildings are set back quite a bit. It might be a one-story retail building, but it's got parking in the front and all around it, not a lot of streetscape, the sidewalks are in tough shape. So we're thinking about where some of those areas are, like north on Milk Street, up past the Dairy Queen, coming into the downtown on East Main Street, sort of on the north side of East Main Street, there's a lot of auto-oriented businesses there. Could those be something different? I think there's something like 4 or 5 gas stations just in downtown alone. So we took a look at some of those. Are there opportunities there for redevelopment over time and make those something different? Do you need 4 or 5 gas stations? I don't know. And then trying to find a couple of those pockets where additional buildings could help frame the street. So this would kind of be our minimal transportation change and our minimal development change.
Thank you. Moving ahead to our next concept. It's the modified town center concept, or the triangle concept. And so here, as I mentioned, we basically create a new signalized intersection at the northern end, the northern approach of Milk Street and East and West Main Streets. We'd also require a signal at Brigham Street to process the traffic there. And this performs very well. It's a level of service B at the main intersection at Milk and Main Street, and then a level of service C at Brigham Street. So from a traffic perspective, it works very well. From a pedestrian perspective, the crossing distances are manageable. There's a long crossing across South Street, but the rest of the crossings are no more than 3 lanes, and some of them are only 2 lanes. With respect to how we change access, we're able to maintain parking on the leg of South Street, right at the bottom where it meets Main Street. We're able to maintain access there, but we reduce that down to 1 lane, and it can be very much traffic calm with raised crosswalks and nicer pavement. And that would be very, very low volume traffic on that leg. It's really just accessing parking spaces and local businesses on South Main Street. To the west on Milk Street, we have the option of turning that southern leg of Milk Street into a pedestrian-only plaza, or keeping that open for traffic for access to businesses and parking. Regardless of the approach you would take there, we would take there, the intersection processes can process all the traffic to the north. We really don't need that southern leg to make the traffic operations work here. So we have a lot of options with respect to this. When we model it, what we see is it performs fairly well. So on East Main Street, you get a queue that builds up, but the timing of the light is sufficient to clear it out. At Brigham Street, you'll see you have a queue that has to wait there. That intersection isn't prioritized. It's really subservient to the Milk Street intersection. And we can let that clear out enough to process the traffic. So we think that this solution is a very good solution. It could work really well. It does not require the taking of any properties. There may be some sliver takings or easements required, just little portions of the front of properties to make this work, but it doesn't require any buildings to be taken. It maintains access to all properties, and we think it's a very viable scenario. And more importantly, it preserves an open space at the center of this concept that is accessible, very accessible, particularly from that southern leg of South Street, where that could be a pedestrian-only space or very much traffic calm space that makes the green very well connected to businesses and storefronts. So we think this is a really viable concept, and we think this would be really favorable with respect to selling it to Mass DOT, because we're talking about their roadways and their intersections. So with respect to the development potential that opens up, it's a slightly different scenario, and Eric will briefly talk about that.
So if we think about a little bit more change with the middle scenario, we think about some other additional development opportunities, most of those sort of being south of Main Street. So along Cottage Street, across from that neighborhood, you'll see we plugged in some townhomes along there that would replace some of the surface parking and a couple of the buildings there. The other thing that we were thinking about was on the backside of that block of Cottage and South and Brigham, there is a town-owned parking lot there. Parking was a big topic that came up in the first meeting. Now, I know it is expensive to build, and also the town would have to maintain it over time, but there is a possible parking garage solution that could be entertained there if that was desirable to the town. Again, that comes with a cost, both on building it and maintaining it, but that might be in an ideal situation for kind of a park once and then be able to walk to the rest of downtown. And then the other thing we're thinking is, as we come down Union Street for the rest of Bay State Commons, like Union Street on the side that's built out is really nice. You have the building frontage, you have sidewalk, you have street trees. Then on the other side, you're looking into the parking lot. I understand there might be some challenges with developing on that side, but what if that became like a new, almost like a secondary Main Street that you could come out of whatever the traffic solution is where the Rotary is today, come down Union Street. You'd go past Bay State Green, you'd walk past all these buildings, and then you'd end up at that future community center. It could be a nice kind of linear sort of Main Street couple down that way. So that's kind of what we were thinking there.
And our last concept is the grid concept. And this performs very well 2, not quite as good as the triangle concept. It performs at a level of service C for both of those signalized intersections. So what we do here is we maintain both legs of Milk Street. Each one would get an intersection, a signalized intersection. We then turn the current green into a town square. And what we do have is at Brigham Street, we now have a stop sign intersection and a new road or street that goes north-south parallel of East Main Street. So we, in the process of taking some of that property, we develop opportunities either for development sites or for additional public space. So those pink-colored areas are all new space that's being created, many of which could be public space, outdoor dining, or potentially the larger areas infill development sites. And when we take a look at how that traffic processes, we see it performs very well. The queues build a little bit once lights turn to red, but they quickly clear out. And once again, this is a peak hour scenario, so this is kind of a worst case scenario. You'll see on Milk Street, the queue builds very much like it does now, but under a green light, it clears out all at once. So it doesn't stay stacked up for a long time. It clears out. This is a very ambitious concept. So we know from a traffic perspective, we could sell it. We think it'd be safe, it'd function well. But it's a much bigger project than Mass DOT would probably be interested in undertaking by themselves. So it would really require a partnership with the town, Mass DOT, and maybe potentially some developers and existing property owners. And Eric, you want to quickly talk about some of the potential here?
So the potential here, I think, is very much like we showed in the last scenario, except on your tables, you'll see we have both 3-story building options and 4-story building options. So as we start to think about the zoning and where you might think it's more appropriate for a little bit higher buildings versus a little bit lower buildings, this might be an option to consider. I also wanted to just point out, I think this graphic is the best one to do it, but if you look at where the town green is and then you just go north across what is Brigham Street and then where that new street, between the new street and East Main Street, I think there's a real opportunity there to open up a potential development opportunity with a building fronting along the town green and maybe one fronting on Union Street. If you go leap across Union Street, right now there's a bit of a grade change that comes down from East Main Street. There's a parking lot back there. Maybe that's another opportunity in the future for some development. And then along the new street, you see there's some surface parking lots there that are existing, that are supporting the businesses and the buildings that are there. Maybe that's another development opportunity along New Street. So if you think about it the way it is now, I think there's a lot of underutilized properties around this concept, but if we think about it in the future, this concept could open up some real high-value development opportunities and really frame out that town green, bringing those active first-floor uses there that could potentially spill out that activity onto the town green with things like outdoor dining or street sidewalk sales, things like that. So again, just some interesting opportunities to think about. So Francisco's going to come back and talk a little bit more about the mobility and transportation strategies. Paula will talk a little bit about zoning, and I'll come back at the end.
Yeah, I've got a few more to get through. So in addition to the intersection, which we know is really the crux of this project from a transportation perspective, we took a look at other aspects of mobility across the town center from a complete streets perspective, trying to accommodate all users, bicyclists, pedestrians, drivers. And what we see is you have some good infrastructure, not much at all of bike infrastructure, so we'll talk a little bit about that. Pedestrian infrastructure is there and it's pretty good. So we've got a series of recommendations building upon some of the assets that you already have. So first of all is to expand and complete your sidewalk network. You have a fairly comprehensive sidewalk network, fairly complete. Almost every road has a sidewalk at least on one side of the street. Milk Street only has one on one side. It's a busy enough road with uses on both sides of the road. It really deserves a sidewalk on both sides of the street. So that's one of the biggest recommendations. We've also identified other areas that would benefit from crosswalks and particularly some mid-block crossing to connect destinations where we anticipate people are already crossing mid-block. Other enhancements would include ensuring that every crosswalk up and down East Main Street has an RRFB, the signal actuator. You press the button, you get the light. The crosswalk right in front of this building on the corner does not. The next one down does, the one up there does. So that's pretty obvious. I think another amenity that could be added would be to create bump outs at each of those crosswalks to shorten the crossing distance, and if there are cars parked, to help you see past the parked cars and help drivers see you. So that would accompany these crosswalk enhancement recommendations. On the municipal parking front, as I mentioned in our last meeting, a parking study was done. It showed that you have lots of capacity, so that's not the issue. While you have many municipal lots, most of them are associated with buildings just like this and are really for staff and visitors of those buildings. Not many are general purpose lots where you can just park and go wherever you want. You do have one, it's off of South Street. There is one tiny sign for that lot. It's not even off of South Street. But within the lot, there's no signs to indicate which spaces you're allowed to park in. Some are used by the diner. So we think that the signage for that needs to be improved dramatically. We understand there are some enforcement issues as well. There are cars parked there for a long period of time. I walked down there today, I saw cars with like an inch of pollen on them, which means they haven't been moved in a couple of weeks. So that lot could be really managed to be much more of an asset and a resource for everyone in the town center, and not just a few people that know it's there and park on a long-term basis. And so, as I mentioned, it's tucked behind the buildings. It's kind of hard to tell which part's public, which spaces aren't. And as I mentioned, there's some various views. There's one tiny sign in the top right corner that says municipal lot, and that's it. It's the only sign. Within, you really have no idea where you should be. So some signage is really needed, and we're providing recommendations to that effect. I mentioned bicycles. And we very much understand people have been working towards creating some regional greenways and routes. So we know where those go, and they pretty much go up and down East Main Street and try to, there's a vision to get out along the rail line. We need to figure out a way to get bikes through the downtown. And your roads are almost wide enough, in some cases just wide enough. It'd be great if they were a little wider to accommodate bikes on street. So we have to be creative in the approach. But regardless, we think the conditions are suitable for bicycling, and bicyclists should be accommodated with some pavement markings and signage. The conditions are suitable for that. So with respect to where we see that, on South Street, on Milk Street, on the northern parts of East Main Street, on the southern parts of West Main Street, we think those corridors are suitable for bike lanes. And in other places where you have lower traffic volumes and slower speeds, you could do shared lane markings. So this is what that would look like. This is West Main Street, just south of here, down the road this way. It's 30 feet wide, just wide enough to get a bike lane in. Now, Mass DOT prefers to have an 11 or 12-foot traffic lane, but 10-foot traffic lanes have been a well-accepted practice for a long time now when accommodating bike facilities in the shoulder. So that's a recommendation. It's low cost. Ideally, we would have more space to do a buffered bike lane here. So we'd want to make a short-term recommendation, something like this, and a longer-term recommendation to accommodate bikes on a separated bike path or within a buffered facility. The shared roadways, Church Street's a great example of where it's safe to bike right now. Let's guide bicyclists to where it's safe to bike, to streets that will connect them to places like schools, and let's provide pavement markings and signage that will reinforce that. With respect to bike parking, you have some bike racks in the area. There's a map on the left. I counted two. One is right down the street here at the library. It's safely guarding the trash cans. The other one is at Bay State Common. Neither rack is a very good design or style of rack, and so they don't get used. And we see, as we walked around and looked around, we saw lots and lots and lots of opportunities for bike racks to tuck away in some perfect locations. And just walking around the immediate downtown, we see lots of spots. And bike racks should really look like what you have on the left. You should be able to attach the bike up high. And you don't need a bunch of them. You just need one or two in most locations, and they should be scattered throughout. So we found all sorts of locations for bike racks. Now, with that being said, that's the high-level view of the mobility recommendations. There's some other stuff that we're working on that fits in, that brings all of that together. But we've got a lot of other things to cover, and I want to hand it over to Paula to talk about zoning. Paula, it's your turn.
I will be very quick because you have been already there sitting for a long time, so I will try to be quick. So what I want to let very clear today, what we're going to do is to talk about the standards regulation, and this is about the dimensions in the districts that are on the downtown. And then we're going to talk at the second part about the use regulation. So the uses that are as of right, special permit, or prohibited in the downtown. What you have in the downtown are 4 districts, and these are base districts. So a long time ago, because of the context, social, historical, economical, there were created these 4 districts that we have today. And these are municipal district. We won't talk a lot about it because it doesn't have to follow dimensions standards, so we will leave that out. Business downtown, we will talk about that one. And then you have 2 industrials, general and exclusive. And so not so far a long time ago, you created a new overlay district. And this new overlay district sits on top of this. And so every parcel in this area in the downtown has 2 districts. And what I want you to have very clear is that every district will have some standard regulations, some dimensions, and then some uses that can go with those districts. But you cannot mix and match. You have to follow one of those. And so what can we regulate in each district and why? So we have in black, you will see the things that we regulate, so all these dimension standards that currently you have in your zoning. So you regulate the minimum area, the minimum setbacks, the minimum frontage, maximum heights or stories, and maximum lot coverage. We can even regulate more things if that is necessary, if that is something that we want. We can also do all the minimums. We can regulate a maximum. We can regulate minimum heights so that we create more of a range. What we get with these things are an idea of a density, right? So we create, we get a sense of some numbers. And what we also want to have very clear with this is that we can also control the scale. And the scale is not so much about the numbers, but it's more about the feeling and the experience that we have in each of these districts. The main goal that we have as urban planners, and the main goal over the zoning, is to create a healthy environment. And that means not only physical, but that mental and that social part of our well-being needs to be considered. So we create places that are, the physical part will be, for example, to not have industrial with residential, because that can be, that can have pollution, and so physically not being good. If we create some green spaces, places to do sports, then we are also treating the mental health of people. And if we create places to gather, places to create community, then we are also taking into account that social aspect of the environment. And so that is our goal. And with these dimensions, we help to create these more walkable, active, diverse, inclusive, vibrant, and safe environments. So you have 2 tables in your zoning. You have one table that treats all the non-residential districts and their dimension standards, and another table that only talks about the residential uses. This is, in red you can see the base district, the downtown business. And what you have on the left, we took those dimensions from the table and we create these illustrations. So you have, this one is for the business, downtown. As you can see in the Rotary area, these are all non-conforming. In the downtown, you have a lot of historic buildings, and so they are going to be non-conforming. You have, I'm going to go a bit quickly. In the industrial part, which is, as of today, this could happen because in your current zoning, you still have this industrial area, and you can have, whenever, a 4-high-story building industrial, because at the moment, you have this district in the downtown. And so this could happen. And then we have the overlay district, so that applies into the whole area. And it's similar to the downtown business. It has more, 2 more stories, and so it is a bit better because it makes everything more conforming, but still it's the minimum of the lot, of the width of the lot is still a bit too big. And when we go to residential, it's not the best. You have a very big lots. You have a minimum of 200 frontage. So these dimensional standards, what it means is that it's very difficult to build residential in the downtown because the dimensions that they ask are way too big. And so we need to understand or to think about if these standards are appropriate for the downtown. Last time we did this exercise, we asked you to think about the scales, and this was this kind of experience. How do you experience the city or the town when you have different scales? And so we give you these images and we ask you to select what percentages of these typologies you would like to see in the downtown. And as you can see, mainly the big majority were in the XS, S, and M kind of a scale, a little bit of the L, and none of the XL, obviously. It's not for the downtown. And so if we will give some dimensions to this frontages to this lot width, you will have that XS will equal 15 feet, the S will be 30, M 60, L more than 100, and then XL more than 400. What I want to explain with this is that our standards, all of them, start with a minimum of 100. And so if we go back and we see, oh, but we ask 30% of people wanted to see that the 30% of the area of the downtown is more like an XS scale or an S. So all of these are less than this 100. And so what we created was what we want to give you today is a set of recommendations. The first one, and this is like the minimal one, we want on those base districts, we want to delete the industrial, because at the moment with our context, it doesn't make sense anymore to have this industrial district, and to extend the business, downtown business district as the base one. And then we keep the overlay district, and what we are going to do is to add to the table of the dimensions in the residential uses, to add a new one for the downtown planning overlay district, so that if we do residential, we can have different standards and that we can actually build residential in the downtown, so that is more easily buildable. And what we're going to do also is modify the overlay district standards, so to reduce those minimums of 100 and maybe to go for a 30 or for a 60. This will help the non-conforming uses to be, the non-conforming lots at the moment to be conforming, and maybe to add a minimum height so that we don't have this difference of 1 floor and 4 next to each other, but that is more a minimum of 2 at least. And the second recommendation, and this is the maximum thing that, well, a bit more bold than the other one, is to eliminate the 2 base districts, only take 1, so you have only the overlay downtown planning district now is your base district. And we did the same with the standards for residential use. We changed them, we create new ones, so we can actually have some residential buildings in the downtown. And the second part is about the uses. We can also regulate uses with zoning. And what we have is usually a table like this, and is mainly as of right, special permit, and prohibited use. What I want you to think is when we say as of right, what we actually mean is those are uses that we want to have in the downtown and that we want to encourage to be built. When we use a special permit are uses that we want, but that we really want to control some aspects of them. And the prohibited is obviously things that we do not want in this district. It doesn't mean that it doesn't happen in the whole town, but it's just in this district. It's not good enough for this district. So when we go into the planning overlay district, what we see is that the big majority is a special permit, and this makes it a lot more difficult to build. So if we really want some of these uses, as we did in the previous meeting, in the public meeting, if we want those uses and we think that are good, then we should change it into as of right. And so as well, the recommendations for this will be to change the uses that we want and to make it from a special permit into as of right, so it's easier to get to them, and introduce this concept of a scale in our zoning. And that is, be a bit more specific. So for example, to have at a neighborhood cafe, and it doesn't have to be a big restaurant, it's just a neighborhood cafe. I'm sorry, I'm taking a bit too much time. But to really have this scale thing so that some things like a light manufacturer, there were some makers space, some creative workspace, that these things can actually be in the table of uses without having to bring all the industrial. So we add the scale to these definitions. I will be around, so if you have any questions, you can totally ask me. I know that it was too quick, but we drop on you a lot of information, so I don't want to keep you so much in here, so I will go back to you. But I will be around, so any questions, please feel free.
One of the biggest challenges I think we face as planners is looking at a downtown that has historical buildings that were built, let's say, pre-1940, before zoning was really a thing in Massachusetts. So the buildings that we're surrounded by today, technically they're near impossible in most communities to replicate, even though we hear time and time again from people we engage with all over Massachusetts and New England, oh, I love that 3-story brick building that's brought close to the street. But when you hear from Paula about what's allowed today, both uses, heights, and dimensions, those things have basically been zoned out. So what we're trying to do with the zoning is listen to you and try to figure out how can we allow that, and how can we also reduce as many barriers to those who might want to invest in Westborough while still maintaining some local control, because we understand the importance of that. But maybe we do as of right with a site plan review instead of requiring the extra hurdle of a special permit where someone has to go through all that additional stuff. Zoning and transportation, I always think, can set the table, and it's things that municipalities can generally control. But at the end of the day, the market sort of dictates investment. It takes someone to buy a piece of property, to own a piece of property, to redevelop that piece of property, to open a business in the first floor of a piece of property. But there are things that the town can do, or maybe improve upon the way that they're doing it, that can help that process along, prime the pump a little bit, incentivize the things that we want to see. So we're going to have a couple of additional recommendations that are around business development. So this is kind of the nuts and bolts, so I'll go fairly quickly. But is the town's existing permitting process, is it clear? Is it easily navigable for people who want to open a business? Does someone entering town hall know who to go to get a permit, or to figure out what board and commission they need to talk to? Or how do they figure out how to get to the fire chief to talk about sprinklers, or whatever their issue is? Do they know how to do it? Once they talk to that person or persons, is the process clear and is it direct? We know also that a large majority of brand new entrepreneurs and small businesses are often folks where English is not their first language. So we see that more and more. So is your permitting guide in multiple languages that speak to different people who maybe where English is not either their strong suit or their first language? So these are all things that I think the town can work on. many of which they're already doing, but there are ways in which they can be improved. So again, we're just trying to reduce the amount of barriers that it takes for someone to come in and do something within reason. On the permitting process, we've talked to the town about potentially developing an online permitting guide for business that someone can go online, they can either look at it online or they can download it, print it themselves, and it's clear. It has the steps, it has who to talk to, it has which boards you have to go to, it has timelines for different types of approvals. And then internally, can we establish what's called concurrent reviews? So right now, if a plan comes in, the police usually need to see it, DPW engineering, of course, planning, maybe Conservation Commission. There's a whole bunch of folks who need to look at that plan and eventually sign off on it. Is there a way to get all those folks in the room at the same time, sort of doing that concurrently so that it doesn't take months and months, but it maybe takes weeks and weeks? And then lastly, aside from what the town can do, I think there's a lot of opportunity here for space activation. So not just about the development and the transportation, but the public and social spaces in downtown. How can we think about improving them? Bay State Green right now, I think, is the primary, in terms of the size, the primary open space, green space in downtown. So are there other things that could be done there to sort of activate that at different days of the week, different times of the day, different times of the year? So we know the farmer's market, if it hasn't started yet, I don't know, but it's going to be starting there at that location. Could there be an artist and makers market sort of building upon that? Are there opportunities for a food truck festival? Are there opportunities for outdoor movies, outdoor fitness classes, things that don't have to cost a lot of money? They could potentially be sponsored by businesses or the town, but just ways to get more people in downtown. We talked about activating the alleyways. We talked a little bit about tying the different public spaces together, whether they be town-owned or privately owned. Francisco talked a lot about signage and wayfinding. How do people find these locations? How do they get there from wherever they're parking, or maybe they're walking from the neighborhood? And then the other thing is just around marketing. So can we have a dedicated website for downtown that talks about all the events, showcases businesses in downtown, talks about opportunities in downtown if there's opportunities for development? In some towns that we've worked in, they actually have a phone app for downtown that has, where do you park? How do I get from point A to point B? Where are the points of interest? Maybe there's coupons or incentives to visit certain businesses, and it could be on the app on the phone. And then probably biggest idea, and maybe sometimes most difficult to implement, is what's called a business improvement district. It's a district that would be overlaid on downtown that property owners would pay into. Then there would be dedicated staff for that. They'd be responsible for cleaning the streets, sweeping up sidewalks, making sure signage is coordinated, taking on the marketing for downtown, hosting and putting on events and paying for that. But instead of the town paying for it, sometimes it's supported then by property owners. There's a small fee that they would pay into. Again, just ideas that we'll be putting out there in the plan for consideration. Okay. So we're about 5 minutes behind where I hope we would be, but we will hopefully make that time up and get you out of here on time, or maybe just a touch after if you don't mind. So what we like to do is put you all to work, and I hope you're ready after that to exercise your brains. If you are facing me, you can flip your chairs around and take a look at the table. In your table group, you'll see there is a big map of the downtown on the table. That map currently reflects the minimum scenario that we showed you, so it's the modified roundabout with a minimal development. What we'd like you to do is, there are 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper. There is one sheet of paper alongside the big map that represents the triangle scenario if you don't like the rotary. There's one sheet of paper that represents the grid scenario if you want to use that. We'd love for you to first start talking in your group about which one of the transportation improvements do you think makes the most sense. The great thing is we scaled those pieces of paper to generally line up with the map. So you can take that piece of paper like a puzzle piece and you can stick it on top. And we also have double-sided tape, so we eventually want you to tape all these. You get done deciding your transportation improvement, we also have building footprints on the other 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper, and they correspond to different blocks of buildings on the map. Some of them are 3 stories, some of them are 4 stories. You can pick them up and drop them on the map. They should fit perfectly, and sort of start to talk about the development that might go around the transportation improvements. If you want to get extra creative, we provided you scissors. Let's say you like one 3-story building here and one 4-story building here. Feel free to cut out the buildings and tape them down. We don't care. We just want to make it flexible. We want you to be able to have some fun and mark up the map. We'll be walking around. If you have any questions, just raise your hand. We'll come right to you and answer. We'll take about 45 minutes, and then we'll do a time check. Hey, Jenny. Jenny. Hello, testing. Okay, everybody, we got about 15 minutes left. So we wanted to just break and do a quick report out from each table and just share with the group which transportation solution did your group come up with? And then maybe just a little bit about some of the development patterns that you chose and why. I'm going to time you, so try and stick to a minute or two, if possible, just so we can get everybody out of here on time. Any group would like to go first? Yes. Thank you, Eric. Everybody, if you could give Eric your attention, that would be much appreciated.
Okay, so we went with this setup for the Rotary, and the name of the game for ours was, first of all, deal with the zoning issue, because of parking sort of dictating everything, and density. As I actually walked around and looked at the others, and it seems like we're on the higher end of that. With a couple things driving this, making it so if we had, let's say, more apartments downtown, especially if seniors are aging in place, some don't want a car, so that if we could have some flexibility around parking mandates. And we had pretty much anywhere we could, we had 4-story, and really would love to see underneath the Rotary or underneath the railroad bridge in front of that big giant parking lot in front of the gym over there near Arturo's as the next maybe place to make some wiggle room with. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. That was a perfect timing. Thank you. Is there a representative from this group, or do you want me to come back? Okay. How about from group number 3? Oh.
I don't like having to be volunteered like this. So our group selected the second choice because it just made the most sense. There was concern about traffic lights downtown, but we feel like, looking at the big picture, that we're looking at the safety for the downtown area, and if that's what has to happen, that's what has to happen. Any of the buildings that we suggested that, for development in the downtown, we really like them at scale at 3 stories instead of 4 stories, and just to kind of keep that, just to keep that small town feel to Westborough, and to give our downtown still that community feel that we all grew up loving.
Thank you so much.
This is the best one, best approach.
Okay. How about group 4? Anybody?
Hi, like everybody else, we like the triangle. It adds to pedestrian safety. What else? What we thought we might like is a mix of 3 and 4 stories, and so we concentrated the 4 stories in just one spot. I don't think any of us are tied to which particular spot. We just kind of put it in the middle of the map, and then the rest, the 3-story build out. And what am I missing? We like the condo stuff. Oh, we like the townhouse, the concept over by Cottage Street. And we really like the pedestrian, thank you, the pedestrian walkway thing between Roach Brothers over on Union Street. That could really be a nice mix. And the reason we wanted all these buildings and some 4 stories is for housing.
Great. Thank you. Great. Okay. Can I get a rep from this group? Chris?
Good evening. We, like the rest of you, liked the triangle configuration. The first one seemed to be as bad as usual and not an improvement in traffic, whereas the square, again, was even a worse solution to traffic. So therefore, the triangle made the most sense as far as traffic patterns. But the other thing we liked was incorporating residential in 2 and 3 stories, and townhouses sound good downtown in place of some of the gas stations and other places that are not as amenable to a lovely town village you'd like to walk by whereas you can see people living, working, and enjoying life in townhouses. We also had the idea of high-rise parking downtown, to have perhaps where there's room, but where Sabatini's is now and the town parking is, to have a one-floor stores, and then to have 2 or 3 or 4 stores above that, that is parking. And that can be done very well so you don't really see it from the street. Donna was saying sometimes it's sort of set back or whatever. So when you drive by, you actually see the one story with stores, boutiques, whatever, but it actually incorporates parking, high-rise parking. So the combination is good. We like the Milk Street shut off into a pedestrian walkway. Just in Hudson myself and noticed how they made their alleys, cleaned up their alleys, landscaped them, put benches in them, and made them into pedestrian walkways and places that you would like to spend time. So if we did that along Milk Street, sidewalk cafes, boutiques, landscaping, benches, parks, I think it'd be a great improvement going across and making crosswalks a lot easier. Also, how many of you love to park diagonally on South Street and back out? Not many. So therefore we said, please eliminate the diagonal parking spaces along South Street unless you'd like to play Harry-Carry every day. And make things easier in general as far as driving around. But we liked the trying.
Thank you. Okay. Next. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll just go around kind of clockwise here, starting where Cha-Cha and Beans is. That area, and we like the pedestrian area. We like the triangle, like all the other groups as well. But in that particular quadrant, we saw the opportunity, if we're going to make that into a pedestrian area, to make that also, you know, a more commercial area where you could have restaurants on both sides of the street, perhaps where the BP gas station is, but also on the other side of the street. Continuing around to the other side, again, we like the reuse of Milk Street up past Dairy Queen, having both lanes of traffic, kind of on that East Main before the railroad bridge, really visualizing, you know, maybe shorter, you know, 3-story buildings in that area with the ability to have multi-use, but keeping in mind that the railroad bridge is going to be a bottleneck as potentially more traffic comes through here. So ideally pushing more larger 4-story buildings out on the other side of the railroad bridge on East Main Street, where like Arturo's parking in that area is, to not add to that bottleneck. On the Bay State Green side of things, we really see that as an area that I think today is pretty well set up. Didn't really see any need to put any additional housing there. Coming back around to Cottage Street, we like the idea of multi-use buildings, parking garage down on Cottage Street where the current municipal parking is. I would also say we liked the closer crosswalks that were mentioned, building in the chicanes or whatever they're called, the bump outs to increase the visibility as you're walking across Main Street. We like the biking. The question would be whether or not there's an ability to go wider than the 10 feet. The concern being trucking and whatnot. You know, all the Amazon trucks out there today, a 10-foot space for an 8-foot truck to get through is pretty tight. We did, just one comment on the triangle, actually 2 comments. The one-way street in front of Ferris Flowers there, we didn't really see any value to that since all of the traffic could come up in the area. We'd rather see that be all green space. And then the parking, the stoplight in front of Brigham Street, that road doesn't take that much traffic, and the right-hand turn out of that is really a right on yield, and the right-hand turn onto it is a right-hand turn on yield. So we didn't necessarily think that there was a need for a stoplight there. Those are our comments. So, sure.
Okay. Anybody at this group?
Hi, we're in total agreement on the middle choice for the triangle instead of the rotary. We also are in favor of terracing over on the Cottage Street side from potentially townhomes to 3-level to potential 4-level, and where it hits any of the main streets having retail, restaurants, or other commercial first floor and building above. We're totally in favor of utilizing some of that vacant space for the parking garages. One of the questions, and you had just brought it up, on the light at Brigham Street, because Brigham Street, as you follow it down, has a lot of industrial as well. If you are flowing through Milk Street, stopping at the light and continuing on, you wanted to take a left on Brigham, where it looks like it's only one lane heading in that direction. It looks like that could be some sort of bottleneck that would have to be looked at, and I'm not sure the DOT would be in favor of that without some sort of turn lane, or maybe doing away with it and having some other format for getting onto it. But I disagree to some extent. I think it's going to become a little bit more important with the community center and the senior center back there. I think you'll see more uses of it, and we want to make it more safe and convenient for the folks there. I think one of the keys as we look at any of these solutions, and I think they're all good ones, is better signage, better directional signs. Where am I? How do I get here? How do I get there? And at the same time, as I said before, utilizing first floor for commercial, retail, residential, taking the time, which I've seen before, where towns can really try and activate downtown morning, noon, and evening, so having the type of uses that bring people there, and also for the pedestrians and the residents that live in the downtown, because you'll see more residential here.
Thank you. Okay, last group. I'm gonna pick somebody.
So we also converged on the triangle concept. Two of the things that didn't get mentioned that we learned is this is going to take about 5 years, and is a cheaper concept because it's really causing the minimum amount of changes. So that makes it a more realistic. The others are 10 years and more complicated, and it may take even longer and be more costly. So the other thing I want to mention is there's really 3 problems we have. One is the traffic going through the Rotary is a nightmare, especially for commuters. Like if we pass through it every morning and come back every evening. The second one is we don't have units here that young people can afford, and also we have issues that senior citizens are finding it harder and harder to stay here because of the taxes. So to be able to develop it in such a way that the tax base becomes such that we are able to distribute the costs over a larger population group would be good to have. And so as long as these 3 issues are addressed, I think we'll be on our way to making good progress.
Thank you so much. Wow, it is 8:01. I've probably done 1,000 public meetings, and the report outs never end on time. So thank you for sharing, but getting us there on time. Appreciate it. So just to wrap up, please leave everything. We need to photograph everything and take it with us, including the comment cards. We're going to create a summary for the town that's going to have photos of everything that came out. And then over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be blending all this together, working and presenting that to town staff, and then actually putting together the draft report that's going to basically take everything that we've done through the process, all of your input, and give the town the report so that they can start working on the next steps of the process, which would be potential changes to zoning, certainly starting to hopefully engage with the state on what does this sort of redo of the Rotary look like? Because without Mass DOT, that's going to be very challenging to do, if not impossible, and other recommendations that we've talked about that the town can take on. So I just want to say we're going to be wrapping up the process, but thank you so much for engaging with us, particularly those who have come to multiple meetings and shared your feelings and thoughts. It's been extremely helpful, and hopefully you can see how we've tried to incorporate that into the vision for downtown. And please continue to follow the town and be engaged in the downtown as advocates for the change. I think they'll need that. So thank you so much.